Hello and welcome back to Hope Neighborhood Learning Center. We're going to continue on our voting smart contract here today. We're just going to be adding a little bit of code, and then we're going to look at how much gas each transaction costs within our particular smart contract. And this is important when you are designing for production implementations to consider how much each transaction costs, because that is actual dollars. And then the last thing we're going to go over is how to use Etherscan to learn from other folks. You see, every single smart contract deployed can be seen on Etherscan. Etherscan is probably one of the most useful tools when learning how to write your own smart contracts. All right, so let's get started and head over to Visual Studio. Okay, so I already had the contract in the location I wanted, but let's go ahead and review what we have here. We have the license, we have the version that we're working on, we have the name of our contract, which is Ballot, voter struct, the proposals, the addresses, and then we have our constructor for the proposal names, and then the function of giving people the right to vote, the delegating function, whether or not folks have voted, when they vote, and then which proposal wins, and the winner name. And then if you recall, we also put together a get bytes smart contract, so that way we could quickly pull the proposal names. So I'm going to click back on the ballot here, and one of the questions that has come up in the comments is, how do we remove the right of a voter to vote? So what you can do is similar to the voter function above here. Essentially we want to create the inverse of giving people the right to vote. So we're going to start with function, and then we'll say remove voting rights, and then we want to choose an address within the voter group, and then we want to do some checks here just like before. So again, this is going to look almost identical to giving voters the right to vote. So we want to make sure, first off, that the chairperson is the only person allowed to remove people. So only chairperson allowed to remove voting, let's say voting rights. Cool. All right, and then the next thing we want to do is we want to check if the voter already voted. So we don't want to remove the voting rights if the voter's already participating in voting. So voters, so from the group voter, that specific address, voter address, we want to know whether or not they voted. And then we'll say something like, I don't know, vote already in progress, or voter cannot be removed while vote is active. All right, and then the next check we want to do is check the weight. So whether or not the voter actually had already been given the right to vote previously. And so require that the voters weight is equal to 1. So do they actually have the right to vote? And then the last piece is we want to then remove, if all those checks go through, then we're going to remove the voter weight and set it to 0. The voters group. There we go. Oops. Don't do that. Cool. Right. Gonna save. All right. So that looks good. So I'm gonna go ahead and connect to the Remix IDE. So now I'm connected to Remix. I'm gonna switch views. All right, and then we'll connect to our local host. Connect. Okay, and you can see our Get Bytes demo here. So let's actually go ahead and compile that because we're going to need the. I should reset this. All right, so let's go ahead and compile our Get Bytes demo, and then let's deploy that. Great, so then that has been deployed. I'm going to expand that view, and then we'll open each of these real quick. So those are our 3 proposals that we'll be using for the voting contract. We'll go back to our contracts and select Ballot, the one that we had been working on, and then we'll go ahead and compile that ballot. And then we will need each of these voting proposals here. So remember, you'll need the square brackets, and you'll need to place each proposal should be complete. Okay, so now we'll deploy. We got the green check. Everything looks good. We'll, so everything looks good. I'm going to minimize the Get Bytes and then expand the ballot. And then what I'm going to do is move this so you all can see it. And so we have these opportunities here. We have the ability to delegate. We have the ability to give right to vote, remove voting, which is what we just added, vote, chairperson, proposals, voters, winner name, winner proposal. So everything looks pretty much the same except for this new function of removing the rights to vote. So first, we'll look at which account. Oh, so I actually deployed the account on my second address here. So I'll just keep track of that. And I am going to select the second address. I'm going to copy that, or excuse me, third address. I'm going to copy that over and then place that in this Get Right to Vote section. And then I'm going to go back to my second address on the list and then give that person the right to vote. So then we got a green check. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this with a few addresses. And when you do this, you have to make sure that when you are giving the right to vote to a particular address that you are back on, oops, you are back on the address that created the contract. All right, so we have 3, I think we've given, let's check our terminal. We've given the right to vote to 3 different addresses. So that's good enough for now. So I am going to then go through each of these addresses, and let's have one of these address vote. All right, so let's have this address vote for proposal 1. Vote, so you can see we have a green check. So that vote went through. Let's go ahead and copy that address and put it into voters. And we can see that that voter has a weight of 1, that voter voted, and that it's been delegated. And so we have 2 other voters of our 3 that have not voted, in which we can remove the voting privilege. So let's select one of those addresses. Copy that. And then put that into the voters here. Oops. Okay, and you can see that they have a weight of 1 and they have not voted. So now we have an address here that we've seen that has a weight of 1 that has not voted, and an address that has a weight of 1 that has voted. And so let's go ahead and go back here. I want to look at my terminal because I lost track. Okay. And so let's try to remove the voting right of this address that we have right here. And so we're going to go back to remove the voting right. And when we remove the voting right, let's go ahead and click on it now. We'll notice an error. It's because only the chairperson is allowed to remove the voting rights. So we need to go back up to the chairperson address, which in my list was the second address, so whatever address you deployed the contract with. And then we're going to click on remove voting right. And you'll see a green check. Let's click on voters again, and then you'll see the weight was reduced to 0. So then let's go ahead and look at an address that has already voted. So you'll see here the voted is true, and so we have shown that this address is already voted. So let's put this in the remove voting section and then go back up to our chairperson address and then click remove voting, and we should see an error. Beautiful. Voter cannot be removed while vote is active. So we have just added this ability to remove a voter from the ballot. Only the chairperson can remove the voter, and you can only remove the voter. The chairperson can only remove the voter if the voter hasn't voted. So there's a lot you can do with this, a lot you can expand on, but I think this is a good start. One of the things I wanted to point out is each of these transactions here require gas. You'll notice in the terminal, if you click on the little down arrow here, or let me move my view here. You'll notice this down arrow here. And if you scroll down a little bit, you can see that there's a transaction cost and an execution cost. So let's go ahead and copy this transaction cost. So this one transaction, and what do we do here? What did we do here? This is when we assigned, or no, this is when we removed voting rights from an address. So we had a green check, so that means that transaction actually went through. So how much did this transaction cost? It cost us $26,802 in gas. And so what is gas? I'm going to go ahead and switch over to this page here. So if you go to ethereum.org, you can look in the developers documents and you can see gas prices are denoted in gigaway here. And gigaway is actually 1 times 10 to the negative 9th ETH. A way itself is the smallest unit of ETH. And so this is how we can calculate our total cost for each transaction. And you'll see in the Remix IDE the gas prices when you expand each transaction. And so you can actually walk through your smart contract transactions and see how much your transactions cost, or how much it costs to fully walk through an entire voting operation for your particular smart contract. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Excel here. We're going to look at this first transaction that I noted, and it costs that much in gas. So that is our cost in ETH. I'm going to choose this to general. So it's not too bad. But these things add up over time. And so if you go back over to our Remix IDE here, and we can see each of these transactions actually cost us some gas. So let's go back up. Let's see. Right here. Let's look at this first transaction. So when we were signing, I think this one is when we voted. So this is our voting cost. Let's go back over to Excel. So that's the cost to vote. So the cost to vote is about 3 times as expensive as it was to remove a voter. And so let's look at one more transaction. So we looked at the cost to vote, the cost to remove a voter, and let's look at the cost to give somebody voting rights. So that was up here. So give the right to vote was 48,000. So let's go over to Excel here. And that in. So you can see now that's 0.000048 ETH. So you can see that these add up over time. And one thing you could do is look at the cost of every transaction required to fully execute your contract, and then calculate that cost in US dollars. So the goal here is really to reduce the amount of gas that you spend to fully execute your smart contract. All right, so that's it for our smart contract today. The next thing I want to take a look at is Etherscan. So one of the things you can do as you're looking at how you want to design your own maybe governance structure or smart contracts, you can look on Etherscan and at what other people do. And so what I pulled up here, and remember Etherscan is at etherscan.io, and what I pulled up here is the Ethereum named service governance contract. This can be found in their documentation, and so I just went over to Etherscan and you can see all the transactions. So people had cast their votes for a particular proposal. And if you click on contract here, it should pop over. We can actually take a look at each of their Solidity files to execute this particular transaction. And so this is their contract source code. And you'll see there's actually 29 files to execute this voting governance. Let's see, what do they call it? To execute the ENS governor smart contract. So you can see it gets pretty involved pretty quickly. But one of the things that I've been doing lately is going into these smart contracts and then just scrolling through and looking at how they solved certain problems, or myself trying to understand what they wrote here, and then working backwards in my mind to understand how the whole smart contract works. And this has been helpful for me as a beginner to learn how to process through this and just see how other people think about their smart contract designs, and also how to program in Solidity. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we are going to continue with a new smart contract in our next episode.